Today, I'm going to speak about the process of communication, that is in the subject of business communication. So we have started off with the video lectures, and we will start off with the first topic, the overview and the introduction to business communication. So what is communication? The word communication, if you see, has originated from a Latin word, which means communis. Communis means something in common. Communication is actually a process of exchanging information, ideas, thoughts, feelings, and emotions through some medium, that is through speech, signals, through writing, through a particular kind of a behavior. If you see in communication process, a sender encodes the message that has to be sent, and he sends that message using a medium, and through a appropriate medium, he selects the medium and sends the message, and a feedback is received. So this is what is all about communication, where the sender encodes the message through a medium or a channel. The message is passed on to the receiver, and the receiver, after receiving the message, decodes the message and gives the feedback. So this is the whole process of, in simple words, the process of communication. Now, communication actually is something people do every day. So communication, if you see the proper definition of communication, it is defined as the flow of information from one level to another level. So businesses include organizations which are engaged in the production, in distribution, in marketing, selling of goods and services in order to earn profit. Therefore, business communication in a business context is viewed as a flow of information or a flow of perception within a business organization or outside the organization among different parties. The means of communication is usually, it takes two modes, verbal and non-verbal. Now, what do you mean by verbal communication? It refers to any form of communication in which the message is transmitted verbally. That is, you speak, verbally you communicate, and the communication is done by word, through the mouth, and or a piece of writing. So the objective of every communication is to have people to understand what you are trying to say. So at the end of the day, any communication that comes from any level goes to any level. The underlying aim is understanding of from the premise of the sender. So verbal communication is one form of communication, where by verbal communication we mean that it refers to anything, any message that is transmitted verbally. Communication is done by word of mouth and or through writing. So this is verbal communication. So we have the parts of verbal communication, where verbal communication again can be divided into two types, oral communication and written communication. So as you know, oral communication is the spoken words. So in oral communication, words are spoken. Spoken words are used as a means of communicating the message that the sender intends to send to the receiver. So it could include a face-to-face conversation that you have with your client, with your customer, with your superior, with your subordinate. It could be a telephonic conversation. It could be a video. It could be a radio. It could be a television. Via the television, you send a particular message. It could also be a voice message that you send over the internet. So in oral communication, communication is usually influenced by certain parameters. The parameters which influences the oral communication are the pitch, the volume, the speed, and the clarity of speaking. You have to understand that psychologically speaking, the pitch, volume, and speed and clarity plays a major role in the kind of extent of understanding of the message that is being put across. So in communication, we have seen verbal and oral. So here in oral communication, what is oral communication? It includes spoken words, And it also includes this spoken words could be through a face-to-face conversation, a speech given over the telephone, or through a medium of TV, radio, or the video, or the voice over the internet. So this is what is oral communication. Then we move ahead to written communication. So in written communication, written signs or symbols are used to communicate. So written message is actually handwritten, or it can also be printed. And in this written communication, the message is transmitted through an email, a letter, a report, a memo, etc. So all the anything that is put down in writing, either you write it or you print it, then that becomes a written communication. So message in written communication also has got a kind of certain parameters that it has to adhere to. So what are those parameters? Where in the oral communication in the previous slide we saw, the oral communication is influenced by the pitch, volume, speed, and clarity of speaking. Whereas written communication is influenced by the vocabulary, the grammar that you use, the writing style, precision, and clarity of the language that is used. So these are the parameters that you have to take into account while drafting a message, either through the print medium or you yourself write it down. So the parameters are the vocabulary that you use, the extent of word usage, and the meaning, the depth of meaning each word that is being used should be understood first of all by the receiver, and from the premise of the receiver, the sender has to draft the message taking into account the grammar that is being used, the writing style, the precision and clarity of language. Then we move ahead to the non-verbal communication. So first we saw the first type of verbal communication, which is the verbal communication. And under verbal communication, we saw about the oral and the written communication. The second form of communication is the non-verbal communication, where you don't use words orally, neither do you write it down, but still you communicate. So that is what is called non-verbal communication. Now, how this could be possible? Through signs and symbols. Non-verbal can go without verbal communication, but never ever verbal communication can go without non-verbal communication. So verbal communication always, in all ways, will be accompanied by non-verbal using signs. But whereas in a non-verbal communication, there is no place for a verbal communication. So non-verbal communication happens through mainly the medium of signs and symbols. Yet again, we have many types of non-verbal communication. So this pictorial shows to you the importance of non-verbal communication in a message that has been conveyed. So this is the breakup of this pie diagram shows you the breakup of how much is the importance, the percentage of importance that is attached to each component of a particular message that is being conveyed. Okay, words carry just 10% of the importance out of a scale of 100 of how much is the importance. Tone of voice carries 40%, and the chunk of 50% goes to the body language. So now through this picture is just a research output of a group of researchers who researched about how a message is being conveyed and conceived. So it is from this diagram you understand that what is the importance of non-verbal communication in our communication process. So 50% of the total message that is being conveyed, out of that, body language rules 50% of the importance of a particular message that is being conveyed. So types of non-verbal communication. So what are the different types of non-verbal communication? We have kinesics. Kinesics is nothing but the body language. We have haptics, the touch language, proxemics, the space language, artifacts, which are environment related. Chronometers is time language, silence, sign language, and paralanguage is your vocalics, the vocalics that you use. That is, we saw about the pitch, the tone, the rhythm, the tempo. So all this come under this vocalics. So we'll see one by one what it is. So first is the facial expression. They say face is the index of the mind. Think how much of information can be conveyed by a simple smile or a frown. So this is what is the importance of the facial expression in a message. When somebody is communicating to you, you frown at them, then automatically the person who is communicating gets the understanding that the message is not received well by you. You smile, then automatically that gives a feedback that the message is received well. So this is what is the power of an expression. Okay, so by facial expressions, we can show how we can understand, or we can even make the person understand whether we are feeling happy, or we are feeling sad, or we are angry, or we are fearful on receiving a particular message, and much more of different types of emotions can be easily portrayed through a facial expression. Head. Now, this movement of head itself is a form of non-verbal communication. If I move my head up and down, it means if I do like this, yes, it means that I'm agreeing with whatever you're saying. I'm saying a yes. Now, if I move it from left to right, then I'm saying no, I'm denying. I'm not a part of what you're saying. So sideways movement of head means a no, or I have not clearly understood. Up and down movement shows you that I am okay with the message that you have told me. But if a person brings his head down and is always looking at his feet, it is a symbol of humility and modesty. Or in some extreme cases, it could be a sign that they have done something wrong and they don't have the boldness to look up to you, look into your eyes. So these are just from the movement of head alone, so much of information can be conveyed. So this is one part of non-verbal communication. Then eye gaze. Looking at another person, just a mere look can convey thousands of meaning. Looking at another person can indicate a range of emotions, which could be anger, which could be jealousy, which could be grudge, which could be a dangerous look. Or you can tell someone just by the way of looking that you are happy, or you're not comfortable, or you're comfortable, or you're unhappy, you're sad, you're joyful, whatever. Array of your emotions can be easily conveyed by a single glance at another person. So this is the power of an eye gaze, which is also considered as a non-verbal communication. Then we have the gestures and postures, where you lift your hand and give a thumbs up. So that means it's okay, everything is right. You want to give a punch. So now we have in the WhatsApp text message a range of emoticons that is used while you're conversing with your friends or whatever. So that is what is known as a gesture or a posture. Even by the way that you sit, you communicate a world of meaning to the other person who's talking to you. Shape of the body. This is a very important factor in communication. The shape of the body and the way you dress also communicates a particular meaning about yourself to the other person. Then personal appearance or adornment. This personal appearance is another important thing where you have to pay more attention to the type of dress that you wear. So there is something called the corporate etiquette, dress etiquette, where you have the business attire that you have to wear for a professional setting. So appearances can indicate your profession from the type of dress that you wear. Sometimes one can say that you are from a particular profession. So particularly doctors, they wear the coat always. Lawyers, they wear the black coat. So from the way they dress, we understand what type of profession they are in. And it also shows the way that we dress. It shows our nature, our interest and taste. And it can also point out at some time our religious and cultural values. So this personal appearance and dressing is more based on the system, the tradition, the custom, and the society that we are coming from. Then we talk about the haptics. Haptics is nothing but the touch language, the power of one touch. So that is what is all about haptics. So when a person has lost somebody and is undergoing unbearable loss, you just go and give them a hug and you empathize with them and share their sorrow. So that hug, more than words, could appease the troubled soul. The hug can do wonders. So that is what is the power of touch, and that is what is called as haptics, which is touch language. And then we have proxemics. Proxemics is all about the space language. So here, to communicate, distance is always important, and the type of distance that we maintain is called proxemics. The amount of distance we need and the amount of space we perceive as belonging to us is influenced by a number of social factors. So when I say space, it could be a physical space, a physical distance that you have to maintain from another person when you're standing close to them and talking, and also the psychological distance that you have to maintain from a person. Now, during the time of pandemic, we don't have any choice but to practice social distancing. Therefore, we are all into the habit of social distancing for over a year or so. But speaking about the physical distance, particularly when a man and a woman are talking together, there is 100% the necessity to maintain physical distance. A man cannot come closer to a woman and stand very close and talk in a professional setting. So that is what is called the space language, or the proxemics, which is a part of your non-verbal communication. And the psychological distance is nothing but knowing when to draw near and when to let go. There are certain things which are called as private and personal. So it is not our business to always be poking our nose into other people's work. So when we understand that a particular person is not comfortable in opening up, then we will just leave it where we started. So that is what is maintaining the space, the psychological space, and giving the other person the freedom to, when they want to share, they will. And if they don't want to share, we understand them. So this is what is the psychological space that you give to the other person. So proxemics could be a physical distance that you have to maintain with the other person when you're doing a conversation in a professional setting, and psychological space that we will have to give to the other person in a professional setting. So this is all about the space language. Then we have the signs. So here I've jotted down a list of signs which talks about the difference. Every sign is got a meaning on its own. And there is no necessity for somebody to come and tell you what is this and what is that, because by looking at it, you know what is it. When it is a left side, yes, it is the left, you have to turn to the left. When it is right side symbol, you have to turn to the right. Where it says stop, you have to stop. So this is what is all about the sign language. Artifacts. Now, artifacts are environmental factors which includes the appropriateness of how you have to conduct yourself in a particular professional setting. The climate, the climate here talks about the organizational climate, where you have to understand the culture the particular organization follows and have to fall in line with that. And then microenvironments, it's all other factors that you have to consider while you are in a particular setting. Like they say, learn to be a Roman when you are in Rome. So you cannot be displaying your own whims and fancies in a professional setting. Rather, you have to fall in line with the customs and practices that has been followed in that particular organization. And olfactics is another important non-verbal communication that has to be paid attention. The scent. What kind of scent that you are wearing? One is not supposed to wear a very pungent and powerful smell. Where you are in the first floor, the smell reaches to the second floor. That kind of a pungent smell wearing of perfume is not acceptable in a professional environment. Of course, you have all the rights to wear a perfume, but the smell has to be very mild and it should not be creating a headache for the other person. So that is the main idea. Then the color. You're not supposed to wear glaring colors. It is not more than saying you're not supposed to. I would say you're not advised to. It is not advisable to wear very jarring and bright colors in a professional setting. And then even the lighting has to be maintained at proper levels in order to have a very good setup of professional environment. So these are all kind of environmental factors which add up to the non-verbal communication. Then we have the chronomics. So what is chronomics? Chronomics is all about the time language. They say after 6 o'clock, it is not appropriate for a man to call a woman, to make a call to a woman. You can either text the message and wait for the woman to call, or you have to see the light of the day to call a woman. So this is what a certain small things that we have to follow when we are working in a professional setup. So suppose if I receive a call at 2 a.m. in the morning, then automatically it indicates a kind of emergency. So this is because I relate the timing of the call and therefore I panic because it could be a very bad news that is coming. Then punctuality is also comes under chronomics. It is not about the Indian punctuality. It is about the real punctuality. If the meeting starts at 10 o'clock, you are to be present 10 minutes earlier, minimum. So that is what is all about the time language, how punctual you are, and how there is the same kind of this chronomics is a very sensitive word. How much you give, so much you will be getting. So if you are being punctual, then naturally people also will be motivated to be punctual to the meetings that you convene. So this is all about the chronomics, the time language. Then we have silence. Silence is speech is gold. Speech is silver and silence is golden, they say. But silence sometimes can be used in a very negative genre also. Now, allowing silence in a conversation puts pressure on the other person. If continuously you be silent in a conversation, automatically the person who's speaking or explaining or giving presentation to you will be pressurized. So sometimes people will use this weapon of silence to intimidate the other person who is speaking. Then silence can indicate hostility. If you hate the person who is speaking, then naturally you will become silent. And silence can also indicate hostility. Silence can indicate disagreement. Sometimes if you are not agreeing to the point that is being told, then you will keep silent. Silence indicates horror. Silence indicates respect also. Sometimes when something is being told to you, even if you don't agree with what is being told, still you keep silent because the person, you have huge respect for the person who is talking to you with you. Therefore, you don't have any intention to speak back, and because it will be considered as disrespect. So silence can also be because of respect. Silence can also be contemplation. So what is contemplation? If you're buying time or if you're keeping on thinking what is happening, then at the time silence can also indicate contemplation. Silence sometimes can be intentional rudeness. Intentionally, purposely, if you want to aggravate or provoke the other person who is speaking to you because you don't have goodwill for that person, then naturally you use silence as a weapon to show your rudeness. Then silence can also be to create a listening space. Suppose in case of what is being told to you is not being fully understood by you, then naturally you will want time to think over and to create a listening space. So that is what is silence. Sometimes silence could be indication of empathy. So, or when someone is coming and pouring their heart to you about some problem or something, then naturally, without giving advice, without talking, oh, the same thing happened to me and blah, 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 your own story, just lending a patient listening ear will do wonders for the other person and will help ease his pain. So sometimes silence can also be an indication of empathy. So this is all about the silence, which is also one part of non-verbal communication. Silence could be negative, silence could also be positive, and it depends upon the person who's using it under the in what situation he's using it. Paralanguage. Paralanguage is all about the vocalics. The attributes of speaking is called the paralanguage, which includes the pitch, the tone, the volume, the tempo, rhythm, articulation, resonance, nasality. Nasality is the voice coming from the nose, and even the accent of the speaker collectively is called as paralanguage. And usually when we speak in English, there should not be 100% the influence of our mother tongue. Suppose in case if our mother tongue is the Malayalam, when you are speaking in English, you should not let the influence of your mother tongue run over the language of English. So English is a separate language, mother tongue is a separate language. So when you're trying to speak in English, you have to speak in English and not with a heavy accent or influence of your mother tongue. So that will not be appreciated, or that is not advisable. So from the way that you speak, from the pitch that you use, the tone, the volume, the tempo and rhythm, one can understand your mood and your situation. And the same thing will be reflected in the person who is receiving it. So this is all about the paralanguage. So we have seen in today's class about what is communication. Communication, first of all, is coming from a word, Latin word, communis, which means something in common. So what is that in common? The message is that which is in common. So the sender intends to send a message to the receiver. Usually the sender encodes the message, okay? And the idea is translated into the form of words, and that is what is called encoding. Whatever is running in his mind, he transcripts the idea into words or in a form that can be understood and received by the receiver. That is what is called encoding. This message is encoded and is sent through a particular medium. That medium is the channel. I could send a mail to you. I could just make a telephone call to you and speak to you. I could write it in a piece of paper and give it to you. I can take my mobile phone, type the message and send it to you through WhatsApp or any other social media. So this is what is called as the sender intending to send a message through a particular medium. And after it receives the receiver decodes the message. That is, what is decoding? The receiver reads the message and tries to understand the content of the message from the premise of the sender. This is what is called as decoding. Now, after decoding, after I open up my message, I read it and I understand, I give a feedback to the sender, whether I am okay with it, I am not okay with it. See, a feedback is not necessarily always should be in a positive note. It could be a negative note also, but whatever it is, a feedback has to be sent. So that is what is the whole process of communication. So in communication, two important words has to be understood. One is understanding and the other is feedback. So whatever is the message that is being communicated, the main purpose and intention is to make the other person understand. So the message has to be drafted in a way that it is well received, in a way that it is well received by the receiver. And for it to be well received by the receiver, it has to be written from the premise of the receiver. Then, that is, in simple words, the sender has to put himself in the shoes of the receiver and then write the message. Then the message will be well received by the other person. So this is all about the communication, and we saw about the types of communication, the oral communication and verbal and non-verbal communication. In verbal communication, we saw about the oral and written communication, where oral is you use words to speak, and then written is you use words to write and you send across the message. And in non-verbal communication, again, we saw range of different forms of non-verbal communication, which can be taken as non-verbal communication. And I also told you some best practices that has to be followed in order to fix the problems in non-verbal communication. Where we also saw that silence also is one important way that non-verbal communication can be portrayed. So next, other topics of communication we shall see in the other class. Thank you.